Lauren Cohen in for Richard Roper today on the Roe and Roper Show. The Roe and Lauren Show. Or kind of Cohen, which is very, very confusing, I think. Way too confusing for me, at least.
Do people, though, ask if you spell your name wrong? They always come up to me and say, you don't spell it right? Like it's supposed to be Cohen. No, I've been spelling my name wrong since I was a child.
Yeah, Conn. I don't know. Wasn't my choice.
You're just a con.
Yeah, and I've been called that before. All right, listen. Okay. This is a very interesting story that the USA's two largest teachers' unions vowed to challenge a judge's decision Tuesday that declared tenure and other job protections unconstitutional for California teachers. The ruling in a case brought by 9 California students. L.A. County Superior Court Judge Rolf True said the current system discriminates against minority and low-income students in kindergarten through 12th grade, saying there's no dispute that there are a significant number of grossly ineffective teachers currently active in California classrooms. And lawsuit asked the courts to strike down several laws providing teachers with tenure, seniority-based job protection, and other benefits. During the trial, the L.A. Unified School District Superintendent John Deasy testified that it can take more than 2 years on average to fire an incompetent tenured teacher, and sometimes as long as 10. The cost of doing so, he said, can run anywhere from $250,000 to almost $500,000. The student said California teachers' tenure system, which allows only 2 years for evaluation before a teacher is hired permanently, does not provide sufficient time to weigh a teacher's effectiveness. The NEA, National Education Association spokesperson, president actually, called the ruling deeply flawed and said that the NEA would support the California Teachers Association in their appeal of this. We'll see how far it gets. But what does this mean now for teachers across the country? And again, remember, these are teachers. These are people from kindergarten through 12th grade. And clearly there are tenure systems right here in Chicago. Jesse Sharkey is vice president of the Chicago Teachers Union. Mr. Sharkey, thank you so much for being with us. As you guys saw this ruling come down, what did it mean for you?
Well, the first thing I did is have to shake my head. I think it's an ignorant ruling because the judge equates an attack on teacher tenure with civil rights. And when I think about the problems that Black and Latino students face in our country and in their classrooms, it's not that their teachers can't be fired at will. In fact, at a lot of low-performing schools, the staffs are too inexperienced. They're untenured. They're often unlicensed. And there was something, the staffs are too veteran, and we can't get rid of teachers. It's they're too inexperienced, and we can't keep teachers.
Well, to the issue of not being able to get rid of them, though, and I think most parents and students would have an experience that they can remember of somebody who they didn't think was well qualified, but had been there forever. I mean, what about that? Should there be more flexibility in getting rid of incompetent people?
Well, in Chicago last year, 3% of probationary teachers were non-renewed for being unsatisfactory. And I think that's what's the grossly ineffective quote that you guys gave in your teaser. The problem, though, is that you're not going to fire the problem. You can't fire your way to a good teaching force. And I think this whole question of bad teachers has sort of become a stalking horse for blaming teachers for the problems that are in the school. Because compare that to the fact that we lose 50% of our teachers in the first 5 years. They've got 3% unsatisfactory, 50% quit. And
why is that,
what we want is good teachers. We need to treat them with some respect and give them good training and things like that.
Well, why are you saying they quit? I mean, why is that a statistic?
Well, I think statistic because I think conditions in school are hard right now, and teachers perceive that there's a narrative that blames us for the problems in our society. And I think CPS, for example, but school districts around the country as well, treat both parents and teachers like we're stupid, and I think that adds up, and it makes it a really hard place to stay.
Is that 50% number? Pardon me for interrupting, but is that 50% number a Chicago number or a national number?
It's both. Chicago tracks a national trend on that.
Okay. All right. So, but back to the question. I mean, let's say, if I accept everything you've said here, that firing is not a way that you can't fire your way to a better system. That makes sense. I think most people would agree with that. But there are teachers that probably that are tenured who probably deserve to be let go. I mean, there's a point at which people start to lose their interest in it, or they lose their effectiveness, and people's life changes, over the decades. So Why not allow for flexibility there?
Sure, but you're using a bazooka to kill a mosquito. Because all that tenure says, tenure doesn't say you can't be fired. It just says you have to have due process for that. In Chicago, it takes 4 years to earn tenure. You have to be very effective in order to get it. And then if at some point down the road you become ineffective, there's an evaluation system in which you're rated, and ineffective teachers can be removed.
Do you know how long that takes?
You know exactly how long it takes. It takes 90 days. You're given an ineffective rating. You're given 90 days to remediate that rating, and if at the end of the 90 days you don't, and it's the principal's decision, you're removed from the classroom without pay. Now, what tenure means is you then get to appeal that decision to a state hearing board. And that's all it means.
Yeah, but that's a costly process and a lengthy process as well. If you're trying to rid a system of maybe complacency, then you have all these other roadblocks thrown into the mix. Other professions don't have tenure. Why should teachers have tenure? Be any different?
When teachers didn't have tenure, they were subject to all kinds of at-will firings for administrators that didn't like what they were trying to teach. It's an idea that attaches to the idea of some kind of academic freedom and people's independence as part of the craft of teaching. Teaching can be very politicized, and tenure is an important defense for teachers in that regard.
But is academic freedom, it's interesting because, you know, you're talking about grade school and high school, you're talking about real primary education issues here. And is academic freedom really relevant in a third grade classroom?
Well, you think of it as academic freedom, you know, when you're not talking about teaching controversial subjects, birth control, things like that in third grade. But people are very uptight about the kind of pedagogical techniques you use with their third graders. And parents and administrators might decide they don't like the way a teacher's teaching, even though the teacher actually, frankly, knows better about what makes for effective pedagogy. And yeah, the history of schools is littered with examples of witch hunts against teachers, and some degree of job security that attaches to the profession. And frankly, we're talking about a right which says that you have a right to be evaluated based on an established criteria, which was bargained by the union and the school district. And no one, including the school district, disagrees with that. I haven't heard anyone saying that teachers shouldn't be evaluated that way. And then you get a right to an appeal. And that's all that tenure means, is a right to an appeal. And the claim that, this is an incredibly long and lengthy legal process just doesn't ring true based on what tenure actually is. Okay,
and this is also based on stuff that's happening in California. Is there concern today as you're dealing with the Chicago Teachers Union and the NEA, or, what are you hearing about how widespread this could become if it is upheld as unconstitutional tenure for kids, teachers?
I just find it hard to believe that it's going to go very far at all. The idea that it's grossly ineffective teachers that are holding back the civil rights of Black and Latino students just flies in the face of reality. Because for the most part, the people who are most dedicated to the cause of the success of our students are the very teachers who this lawsuit and the narrative behind it are trying to blame for the problem.
All right. Jesse, thanks very much. Appreciate it. Jesse Sharkey, Vice President of the Chicago Teachers Union. Your thoughts on this at 591-8900, but first. All right, to the phones we go. 591-8900. A judge in California has ruled against tenure for kindergarten through 12th grade teachers in the state of California. Is that going to sweep the nation? Is the idea of tenure for high school teachers or grade school teachers going to go away? Should it? 591-8900. Jesse Sharkey from the Chicago Teachers Union said absolutely not. No. Didn't he tell us that, Lauren? No.
He did. He said no. But I maybe disagree with him, Ron. I think maybe this does set a precedent because it's not about – there are plenty of good teachers out there. There are good teachers out there. But the question is, if there are complacent teachers out there or the teachers that aren't very good, why should tenure be part of the system? Why shouldn't it operate the way everything else operates?
Will, you're on WLS. Hey, Will.
Good afternoon. That guy, he's just basically a shill for the union. He was talking about the teacher rating of effectiveness, effective or very effective. 97% of Chicago teachers are rated effective or very effective, according to news reports that I've read about this. But we just know that that flies in the face of common sense. Why would we have a school system with as poor performance as we do if the teachers were so highly rated? The concept here, he talks about, they want to protect from political things. Well, I think the more political aspects that you have affecting teaching are the politics of the union, because the unions define everything. He said that the various standards and the criteria were legislated by union contracts. Let's look what happened to Wisconsin, where they basically made teaching a right to work thing, where you didn't have to join the union like you do in Chicago. And, up there, 40% of the people quit the union, and they wound up saving things, saving money and being more effective. A lot of teachers left. I think a lot of teachers leave early because the young teachers, the idealist teachers, get fed up with the system, which is basically being run by the union. And the part of the system that's not being run by the union is being run by elected politicians who get campaign contributions from the union. Oh, and one more thing.
Yeah.
You're talking about your thing before about the upset with cancer, which ties into that. This just kind of goes to show that the whole idea of campaign finance reform is out the window, because the guy who put in $122,000 against how many millions of dollars, he won the election.
Yeah, I did. I think campaign finance reform is sort of a less effective measure, is a less effective tool when you get down to these lower, congressional district, right? Every congressional district has roughly 700,000 people in it.
Yeah, but I mean, the whole thing about teaching, it's run by the unions. They run all the shows. Just listen to what Karen Lewis said last time. She said the union is not concerned about the children's welfare. It's concerned about the union members.
Yeah.
That's what she said.
All right.
Well, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Will. Andy, you're on WLS. Hi, Andy.
Hello.
Hello. Go ahead, sir.
I'm not a big fan of unions, and I'm not a fan of tenure, but I don't think that's a problem that we have in Chicago. I think the problem in CPS is the fact that we have teenage girls having children, and we've encouraged it by the welfare system that we have. And then these children grow up without fathers in the household, and the gangs adopt these kids, and then we have all these shootings. I mean, we need to change that system. We're encouraging the wrong behavior. We've got children raising children. And
I understand, but it's and I don't disagree with what you've said, but I think it's a little off the point here, because we're talking about teachers in schools where not necessarily in gang neighborhoods. We not every Chicago public school has that issue. As a matter of fact, many do not have that issue at all. So the question is a little more broad than that.
Well, we've still got a 50% dropout rate in the city of Chicago, and that's horrible. You can talk about these magnet schools that aren't under the control of the unions, but they're cherry picking the best kids, and of course.
Well, the magnet schools that still have the unions in them. That's not really the issue. It's the charter schools that are the ones that are non-union. And
I'm sorry, the charter schools,
yeah.
But they're cherry picking the best kids for those schools. I would venture to say that if you look at those children, they come from, upper middle class families with parents that push them to strive for excellence.
Yeah, well, I think that's in the magnet schools. Actually, in the Chicago charter schools, those are designed more for what you're talking about. They're designed more for the students who are good in the neighborhoods that are blighted. They're having these kinds of problems, so you can separate out the kids who want to have a shot at actually learning something versus the getting mainlined into a school that doesn't have that kind of discipline or that kind of structure to it. All right, back right after this.